Hello everybody, a warm welcome to all of you to our session from FFA Solutions Week, now the virtual workshop on Racing to Scale, Nature Positive Agriculture. I am Heike Zeller, I'm a consultant on regional marketing strategies, and I will be moderating this session. This event will consist of some parts. First of all, we will have the presentation by Rupert Simon from Systemic. Systemic is also the host for this event, and they will give us a short introduction on their proposal on how to make agriculture in Europe by 75% nature positive by 2030. After this presentation, we will have 3 blocks of high-class speakers here to speak up on several questions according to the economic aspects of the proposal, about the social effects, and also on the consumer perspective. So we have 3 big blocks of questions from speakers here. You can see them in the little edges here. And of course, we would like you, the audience, also to contribute, and we have 2 ways to do it. First of all, we have provided polls to get a broad glimpse of your opinion on the topic. And secondly, we ask you to submit your specific questions or remarks in the chat. A colleague of us will go through and pick some, send them to me, and then I will hand them over to the speakers, or more precise, to Rupert Simons. As you can see already with all the pictures here, with the little videos, we have a very promising bunch of speakers, and therefore I have to be a very strict MC. And so I brought some little helpers with me, which is here a very analog thing to help us through the tight schedule. But I think it's good for all of us because we would like to bloom everybody here, so to get all the whole perspective from everybody. I'm looking forward to your contributions from the speakers as well from the audience. And I hand over to Rupert Simons now. He's a manager at Systemic. And Rupert, please, would you like to tell us your vision for the agriculture in Europe by 2030? Floor is yours, Rupert. I can't hear you yet, Rupert. We try to get back to the presentation.
Yeah, we're trying to get to the presentation. Good morning, everybody. Okay, I hope you can see the presentation now.
Yes, you can.
Wonderful. Good morning. I'm so sorry that we can't all be together in Brussels this morning. I used to travel regularly on the 7 a.m. Eurostar, and I really miss my early morning cycle rides across London to catch that train. Not least because it deprives us of the pleasure of in-person interaction, but also because in the last year I feel we've lost, at least I personally have lost, 3 things that used to connect me to the European debate in Brussels. First, the British government took away my European citizenship. Second, COVID-19 took away our ability to travel. And third, the current lockdown we're in took away my ability to get a haircut. So I'm feeling really constrained in all 3 respects, and I hope you'll forgive me for the tone at the start of the presentation. I'm really missing these in-person connections a lot. Let me briefly introduce the session that we plan to conduct this morning. First, I'd like to talk a bit about why we're here today and the case for nature positive farming in Europe, what we mean by nature positive farming, and what interventions we believe can help nature positive farming to cover 75% of the European farmland by 2030. And Heike will then lead us in a discussion. And let me express, first of all, my thanks to Heike for moderating our large group this morning and bringing in audience questions where we can. Second, to our fantastic discussants who I've enjoyed getting to know, some of you through our preparatory calls and meetings. And third, I'd also like to thank some of the organizations who've helped us develop the concept for today and put together this session. I'm from Systemic. We're a system change company. Our main offices are in London, Munich and Jakarta, and we just opened in Amsterdam and hopefully soon in Paris. And we work on food and land use issues around the world, particularly in Indonesia and now also in Europe. I'd also like to thank the OP2B group, and Florence Chanté from OP2B will be speaking later. IUCN and Luc Bas from the Brussels office of IUCN will also be speaking, and WBCSD, including Diane Holdorf, who will be speaking later. Thank you all for your contributions to helping put this session together. So the proposal that we'd like to make today is for a European food and land use system that is 75% nature positive by 2030. And why do we need to do that? Well, let's look at where the system is today. We have a system that has been optimized for production and in many ways has done that very well. But also in so doing has created relatively high emissions, has contributed to forest loss around the world, has degraded soil, and globally we still have very large numbers of farmers who aren't able to upgrade their livelihoods and productivity. Meanwhile, we have declining health and nutritional outcomes in many places. And the success stories in the food and farming industry, we are there. We know they are there. Some of the people speaking today epitomize those success stories, but they are still far too limited and it's difficult for them to scale. Why is it difficult to scale? Well, we know some of the reasons. We still have a lot of dispute as to what should be the future of the food and farming system, as we've seen in the disputes over the farm to fork strategy and the reforms of the common agricultural policy. Linked to that, it is not clear to many of us how we can embark on a transition to 2030. What are the transitions? What are the pathways to achieving that? And because that path is not clear, it's difficult for the private sector to jump in with the incentives and the investment to bring about the transition. In short, we have insufficient collective action at the scale or speed needed. But we also know from the work of pioneering farmers across Europe and across the world, and from the extensive modeling and research has been done, that a better system is possible. And it's a system that is consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals, that is consistent with the Paris Accord, and in particular, the EU's bold ambition to cut emissions by 55% by 2030, but continues to provide food security and nutritional quality and livelihoods. We can do all those things. Our proposal, therefore, is to create a bold ambition for the food and farming system by 2030 that's anchored by a target to farm 75% of Europe's land in a nature-positive way by the end of the decade, that builds on the Green Deal and the farm to fork strategy. But in addition to the targets set out there, some of which are to reduce things, we're proposing we need a positive target that is to increase things, not just to be less damaging or to reduce certain inputs, but to be nature positive, because a positive ambition is always powerfully motivating. And of course, this would have to build on the instruments already contained in the Common Agricultural Policy, reformed where possible, including the eco schemes that are being introduced through the latest reform. What do we mean by nature positive? So there are many concepts out there of how to reform the food and farming system. We don't need to go into all of them today. But what we mean by nature positive is a system that focuses on outcomes. And at a minimum, those outcomes need to be carbon sequestration, enhanced farm biodiversity, enhancing the resilience of crops, and sorry, my screen is moving around. Enhancing the resilience of crops, enhancing water holding capacity, farmer livelihoods, and nutritional quality. And we believe we can do all of these things, but we don't have all the practices in place yet that will do that. And the research in some parts is still lacking on how to link practices to outcomes, and more is urgently needed. But we can't afford to wait for that research to be in place. We have to start work on the transformation now and monitor and learn by doing as the changes are introduced. Of course, there has been extensive research already on the big picture. on how to get to net zero, on how to get to food security, on how to get to healthy soils, biodiversity, and better farm livelihoods. On this page, I've just shown a few of the reports and analysis that have informed our thinking, including the report from the Food and Land Use Coalition on Growing Better, which my team at Systemic contributed to in 2019. And we're also inspired by all of the other papers on this page: IDRI's vision for an agri-ecological Europe by 2050, IEP's vision for net zero, the IPES food vision for common food policy, and most recently some work that has been done in the European Parliament on reconciling farm to fork with the instruments needed to achieve it. However, what we now need to do is move from a high-level goal and understanding of changes needed towards specific interventions that would deliver that nature-positive farming vision. And here we'd like to propose 10 interventions that can help to get us there. Starting on the left, first we need to inspire the system and the system actors that change is possible and help them start moving in the direction of that change. That starts with a bold vision for a nature-positive farming system that is translated into targets and transition plans, and that is inspired by the amazing, progressive, and nature-positive farmers all around Europe who are already working on this and finding it to be good for their soil and for their farm economics. That needs to be enabled by a nature-positive farming framework that will bring together the outcomes, the indicators and practices that constitute nature-positive farming, by a data collection protocol and metrics that will allow us to monitor how these transitions are implemented and what their results are, and a farmer enablement platform that provides farmers with the resources they need and the peer-to-peer connections that will help them transition. And finally, to accelerate all of these changes, we need financial mechanisms that reward nature-positive outcomes, both from the private financial sector and from the official sector in the form of policy instruments that incentivize nature-positive farming, and are linked to training and accreditation schemes so that farmers can provide companies with nature-positively produced food, and companies are sourcing it. And we need to pay great attention in that process also to the international dimension of sourcing. It would be deeply counterproductive if EU policies and instruments served to incentivize a nature-positive farming transition in Europe, but then exported the emissions and the biodiversity loss to other parts of the world. So that's a very critical piece that we need to look out for. Of course, all of this needs to be underpinned by large-scale engagement and consultation with the farming community. I'm very pleased to say we have some nature-positive farmers joining us today. I'm looking forward to intensify very significantly in the coming weeks and months our engagement with both individual farmers and also some of their organized representatives. If we do all of this, then we believe by 2030 we could be in a place where the big food and retail companies are sourcing and selling food that has been sourced nature positively, using the code where possible and incorporating that into their marketing, where farmers are at the forefront of a movement towards nature positive farming and are farming over 75% of their land using these practices with a view to getting to 100% as soon as possible, where policies at both the European and the member state levels, and also the countries that are in Europe but outside the EU, are orienting their policies towards nature positive farming using the eco schemes and others. And finally, where consumers and food buyers, ultimately all citizens, are motivated and empowered to eat nature positive food and to be proud of their food and farming system. So I hope that sets us up for the discussion, and Heike will lead us through the questions that we would like to put to our discussants today. And I've put my email in this page, and I'll also put a PDF copy of this presentation in the chat once I've finished speaking, so that people who came a bit late can have a look through and see what we've started with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rupert. I guess from everybody here in our big round, we are over 440 participants today, so we are quite a bunch here to listen and to discuss. And now we would like to get a glimpse of your opinion, as I said before, by getting the poll to you. And so, Anne-Sophie, please show the audience the poll, and please answer the poll from your point. Do you believe a regenerative farming system in Europe is achievable by 2030? A nature-positive farming in Europe achievable by 2030? We have three options. You can see them on your screen. Fully believe it is achievable, partially believe it's achievable, don't believe it is achievable. And we are looking forward to the results. Please press the button you think it's your standpoint. We will wait some more seconds that everybody could grab the mouse or touchpad. Okay, great. So we're here, as you can see, the speakers answering on the first question now. But first of all, we would like to see the poll results. Please, Anne-Sophie, would you like? Thank you very much. So we have, as very often in social data, we have the tendency to the middle, which is, I partially believe it is achievable. 73% of you think that it's partially achievable. Then the second place goes to it's fully achievable, and 9% don't believe it's achievable. Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie. And so we will go now to a first question, and it points to the economical aspects, as I said. One reason sometimes given for farmers not to invest in nature is that it is perceived as uneconomic. What is required to make nature-positive farming economically attractive to farmers? That is the question of the round we see now on the screens. And the first respondent, the first speaker to answer this question is Galina Pejeva. She's from Bulgaria. She is a farmer and also financial manager of Trachea RM. Galina, would you please give us your opinion on the proposal and the question?
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. We farmers do business like any other business people. We assess risk, profit, and try to predict favorable outcomes. So to make the leap towards nature-positive agriculture, farmers need evidence that the nature-positive approach will work, and they need specific models for what it will actually look like in their own region. Therefore, it's impossible to overestimate that in order to scale nature-positive farming, it will require the power of trusted mentors and strong peer networks. I think that the way to convince farmers to switch to nature-positive farming is by hosting programs and field days, conducting on-farm research rooted in the farmer questions in their specific queries, and building a peer-to-peer network of farmers who exchange knowledge and experience so we can scale the approach and show its adaptability. It takes time and considerable risk to successfully get from conventional to nature-positive farming. And given the cost burden and the risk aversion of farmers, innovative nature-positive farmers should be acknowledged and compensated by sharing the burden of the cost of good land stewardship. It can't happen just on the side of farmers. It should happen on all sides, including society, including the European Union, including consumers and the middlemen. As governments seek to enforce the Green Deal in a sustainable way, and the Commission is charting very publicly ambitious climate strategies, decision makers should consider establishing nature-positive farming as a legitimate path towards a sustainable agricultural future. And from what I've seen from the presentation we just viewed together, it is an approach that many people share. So if we go back to the poll question, I'm also in the middle. I think it's partially possible, and I think we have very good ideas how to get there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Galina, and perfect timing. Thank you on that. I would like to ask also the whole audience to contribute with questions, provide questions in the chat. So we will have some space for them after the speakers responded on the question. And so feel free to add your opinion. We would like to hear it all, see it, read it. Second of our official speakers is Mateusz Czarnocha. He is the CEO of European Carbon Farmers, Regenerative Agriculture Fellow at COP26. He's the Junior RIS Project Manager at EIT Food, and he's also a farmer. So, Mateusz, please give us your opinion on the topic.
Thank you, Heike. Can you hear me, first of all? Awesome. Pleasure to be here, and both hard act to follow after Galina, and at the same time delighted to be really connecting with what Galina has said in her remarks, because they are really spot on. And I would like to divide my 3 minutes into 2 parts, like specific example of our family farm and European Carbon Farmers, which has emerged out of the family farm, and then kind of bring that back to the big question we are discussing and this ambition that we all share. Our family farm is located in northern Poland, and we are farming 700 hectares in nature positive way or regenerative way. The reason why we have transitioned from conventional agriculture, which we were in till 2004, and transition to permanent grassland that we are in right now, was because of the CAP, of the Common Agricultural Policy, which enabled us to look at what we are doing through financial perspective and do some math and calculate as well as look at the trends in our operation prior to 2004 and say, hey, how can we leverage best CAP to be making money, as Galina has mentioned, very, very important, we are a business, and do that in less riskier way financially, with less negative externalities environmentally speaking, and hopefully positive externalities for environment that we are also contributing with. And the major one of those is carbon sequestration, which now we are trying to monetize with European Carbon Farmers, and we are trying to encourage other farmers to go through the same transition, encouraging them in a financial way. And that brings me back to this high level perspective, right? To me, the framework in which the world wants to operate and wants to be is very clear. We want to be net zero by 2050, which means massive changes for every single sector of the economy, including agriculture and land use management, land use change. Our sector is placed in a unique way in that equation, because we can not only reduce our emissions, which we should be doing, but we can also get to negative emissions and being carbon sink. That in itself is not enough, meaning getting to net zero is not enough. You can have different pathways to get there. And I think EU did a wonderful job with understanding that it's not about net zero only, but it's about biodiversity, it's about producing wonderful food. And that's why we have a bunch of those strategies, which are unfortunately for an average citizen, including farmer, confusing, but they are very much necessary, because we are not only aiming for net zero by 2050. And then what's needed? 2 things. One, showing that bigger picture and making that ambition very, very clear, that we are aiming for net zero. This is our goal, but it's more than that, and farmers can and should be key part of that solution. And then point number 2, we need extension and research, which also Galina mentioned very eloquently. Research, extension, sharing how to do that with actual examples is the biggest opportunity and challenge. So I am certainly in the first group. I think it is totally possible, but it is up to us and our decisions to get there. It won't happen automatically and by default, but it absolutely has to happen. And I am glad everyone in here, and I understand everyone tuning in as well, is very much part of the solutions group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mateusz, on your opinion. So we have already 2 people on the positive side of positive nature farming. So we go to the 3rd speaker in this block, and this is this is Florence Jantet. She's the managing director of OP2B, and I would like to hear your opinion now, Florence. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you hear me properly, first of all? Yes. Great to be with you, and great to join the people and the organization who believe that it's possible to get to positive farming in Europe in the next 5 to 10 years. And we do that through the organization, which is OP2B. OP2B stands for 27 big organizations who are currently working hard on changing their supply chain to address bringing back biodiversity into the fields. And we do that through the transformation of our supply chain. So what I would like to share here is indeed what is our learning and where do we think that we need to work together. The first big challenge that we are together facing to go and make it happening from an economical perspective is actually probably to start reinventing the collaboration and the cooperation between all actors from the fields and the farms to fork. And it starts by example like this coalition, which is about how do we work pre-competitively all together. So it's not about adjustment of the way we work, it's about reinventing the logic in which we work. It means building trust, building transparency, building different collaboration, and bringing the farmers back into the core of the discussion. So I'm very happy to follow the enthusiasm of Galina and Mateusz here in this talk, because we need you guys as leader of this transformation. The second thing that will be necessary and is urgent is that the scale and the speed of change will depend on the demand and the demand creation. Without consumer awareness, availability of the product and affordability, there is no way that the full chain, which are businesses, including the farmers, will have the intent to change. So how do we reconnect the food and the agriculture and make the consumer much more eager to buy and so request more of these products on the short notice and at scale? The fourth thing, which is probably needed, and I think this is a big elephant in the room, is to support the transition cost. There is a cost to this transition, and we know, and Mateusz can just testimony, that when you are there, is actually much better in terms of profitability for the farmer. How do we get to this transition? Through a coherent set of incentives that will incentivize positively all the actors of the chain to change. And these incentives should be also supporting, as Galina was saying, a lot of capability building for everyone. And the last thing is getting investment. Mateusz was talking about carbon is one of them, but can we go beyond also to incentivize and actually acknowledge the value of the ecosystem services, which can be a way to get revenue from the farmer beyond the crops that they don't are actually remunerated today for. So get the finance truly involved in those discussions, financing this transition in a different way. And to make all that possible, we need to measure the progress and we need to celebrate the progress to make it happen together. Because this is at the end all about business from the different actors on the chain. And business is about managing figures.
Thank you, Florence. Yes, I think it's very crucial to look on the economic aspects as well, because we are often stress out the ecological aspects and everything, but in the end, somebody has to get them the living out of it. And so that's a very crucial part, especially for the farmers. And yeah, I think it's really a point where everything is somehow decided in the end then. Thank you, Florence. Now we have the last speaker for this block, and it is James Ead. James is a sustainability manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Cargill's Batches, Sweeteners, and Texturizers. James, please give us your view on the topic. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Great. That's the usual COVID start of any presentation. Welcome, and look, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. And look, you know, it's great to follow the other speakers. Real great practitioners on the ground, 2 farmers, and obviously Florence as well, involved in such a great project driving that forward in Europe. So as ever, as the last speaker, I have to, you know, find that momentum, that all those subject areas already covered. But I think what I will say is, you know, here at Cargill, we believe agriculture is how we will address the many challenges that we have. You know, whether it be climate action, whether it be water, etc., etc. So in terms of, you know, the tool and the empowerment of farmers and agriculture is absolutely fundamental to our business in terms of how we go forwards. You know, we do have those commitments as a business, whether it's on greenhouse gases through a Scope 3 commitment right down to farm level, plus water as well, and farmer livelihood. So I think it's really great that when Rupert talked about this subject to really highlight nature is well beyond just one particular aspect, but many, and right through to that livelihoods piece as well. Florence talked about ecosystem services, all this kind of terminology as well going forward. But what would I say a bit here? Yes, we talk about economic value, and sometimes people always go back to that's just hard cash that we need to put on the table, and then farmers will suddenly change. But as we've seen, to me, it's really about that system change and empowering that system change with farmers, giving them that confidence. We're ultimately asking them to do something new and different, which they haven't necessarily always done before. They might have done a little bit here, but how they embedded it into their system. They've been sent on a certain direction for many years, 50 odd years potentially, and to give them that confidence. And I think what it is really nice when you do sit down with any farmer, they always have that idea of what they want to do, something different. So it's helping them to do that. And as many have said, it is about, you know, giving that training, it's giving that demonstration. Farmers learn best from farmers, etc. These kind of things. And yes, those markets that are developing, whether it's carbon credit markets in agriculture, whether it's ecosystem markets, will help that process and transition. Many of us in the food sector have those commitments. We see them developing as well. And I'm just looking at the time, and the last minute I really wanted to stress is that many farmers we see, like Matthias, who's already done that transition already, and I'm really keen that those farmers really are celebrated. And Matthias, we've got a factory in Wrocław in Poland, and if you grow wheat, I'd love some of that wheat, please, to connect you into that system. And the same with Galina. You know, we're ultimately sourcing, you know, sunflower, etc., within Bulgaria as well. So connecting you into those systems to get that benefit and value right down to the farmer level, I think is great. So that was just a bit of a parting practical example, and I am being serious, Matthias, so I will reach out to you on that as well. So but anyway, thanks a lot. It's a really good discussion. Yes, we're very committed as a company to build this. You've seen our commitment in the US, 10 million acres in regen ag. You will see that soon extend globally as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. So we're already doing here some business, even more direct than I thought before. So we just link the people directly in this workshop. How cool is that? We have questions coming in from you, the audience, and we would like to ask you as well to put in your names or also your organization if you would like to. So we can also call you by name here with the questions. I start now with the first one without have been saying that beforehand, that we will add your names if possible, but I hope it's okay to David Newman, because you submitted questions quite interesting. He asked from the US perspective. He says that in the US, how do diets that became more homogeneous over the years play along with a more heterogeneous nature positive farming? So he says that in the US, they have made this change as well by changing of the diets. So what can we say from this point of view for Europe? Rupert, would you like to join the discussion here? Or James was raising his hand, Florence as well. Maybe ladies first. Florence, would you like to answer on that question, please?
I'm going to be short to make sure that there is time for the others to answer. I think the plant-based diet has been very much growing fast and pre-Europe into the American market, and this is what we see growing at the moment if we see consumer trend also in Europe. So it's coming later, and it's again, how do we support as industry this switch of consumer by making the offer available? So the offer and pulling the demand is very important.
So yeah, offer, pushing and pulling, so the effects. Yeah, James, you would like to add something?
Yeah, just one thing, you know, rotations, crop rotations, fundamental part of regen ag or nature ag, what have you. And even work we've done in the US with the Soil Health Institute, you know, bringing in different crops to a rotation and the benefit financially that can give. We know bringing in a legume into a wheat rotation, the benefits, lots of research to support that. But even bringing in oats into a rotation as well can benefit things as well. So again, it's bringing that. You know, farmers would never have considered that. You know, yes, there needs to be that market for the oats if they grow them, clearly, as well in the location where they are. But it's again bringing that confidence in and those new market opportunities. And what's a very large brand of oat milk suddenly going to float this year. So I think there's a bit of market for oat milk and oats at the moment.
Thank you very much. We have another question coming from Adam Jastrzebski from Eastern Europe. A proven business model to show that regenerative farming is profitable is needed to convince farmers to make the transition. Specifically addressing farms, is there an example or research institute that has used keyline design, agroforestry, silvopasture, and holistic management that has real numbers? Galina, do you know any of these institutions or research that has been made? Please unmute yourself. Galina, we can't hear you. Still not? I'm afraid. Oh. I can see you now. Now it's working.
Now it's working. I'm sorry, for some reason it froze. Well, actually, I'm not aware of an institute, but I'm aware of a farm. It's my own farm. We farm 1,200 hectares, and we have been using our main priority has been soil health and practices organized towards achieving soil health. So we have used a number of measures like no-till, the use of cover crops, and diverse crop rotations. We rotate up to 8, even 9 different crops on our farm in order to achieve nature positive farming. And since my reports are public, it is evident that this has been working not only in terms of soil health, but also in terms of profitability. My main issue is that it's very difficult for farmers to try it. It doesn't happen overnight. So the problem is not that it's not working, it's working. The problem is it takes a few years while you transition, while you learn, while you find out what will work on your farm and what will not. And this is what stops most farmers from from going into regenerative farming. I don't think there is a farmer who intentionally wants to harm their soil, because this is our main resource. I think all of us want to do what's best for our land and for our climate. It's just a matter sometimes of economics. That's why it's so important to have the support of society and the Commission on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Galina. I think that was the perfect summing up of the first block. Thank you so much for that. We're going now to the second question, to the second block of speakers. Thank you to all of you now here in the round, and we will switch to the next ones. So the second question, bye-bye. Hope to that you stay in line for later on, but thanks now. The second question is, we sometimes hear that the rural sector is in crisis. What can be done to make nature-positive farming a thriving industry that supports secure jobs and livelihood in rural areas? So now we would like to focus on also the social aspects of nature-positive farming. And as the first speaker, I would like to welcome Petra Laux. She's Acting Chief Sustainability Officer from the Syngenta Group. Hello, Petra, please, the floor is yours. You have to give your talk now. Oh, but I can't see her yet. I've seen her before, but not now. We try to switch the screens. Maybe no, here she is. Hi, Petra. Would you like to speak up so we can hear you if everything's working? No, I can't hear you. Still not? I'm sorry, still not. We're working on that.
Yes, now it told me I was muted by the organizer. Now you can hear me, right? Okay, the first sentence, like everybody else. Good morning, everybody. So first of all, thanks to ELO and Systemic for bringing this topic forward, because we believe it's exactly the topic to talk about. We believe in Syngenta we need a farming system that works for the majority of the farmland, for majority of society. So the 75% goal and the timing in 2030 is exactly what we would love to achieve and contribute to. Now, Heike, to your point, what needs to be done to make it work? Actually, Rupert has been pretty comprehensive in his introduction, but let me make clear 2 points, and then I also look at the rural livelihood question. So the first point that is really important for us is that we together agree on the outcomes we want to achieve. And Rupert showed us the 6 categories. Yes, it's carbon, but it's also biodiversity, it's water, it's also efficiency. We must make sure we keep an eye on yields, right? Otherwise, we increase the land that is required for farming. So this is exactly the right thing. And we were a bit disappointed by the Green Deal vision and the farm to fork strategy, because a lot of the indicators there are process and input indicators, and we believe it's the outcomes that counts. And once these outcomes are set, then you can start with competition, how to achieve it. You know, we talked about learning, farmers learning about how to get there. And if we have the outcomes clear, we can also align the incentives behind it. And because that's, as we heard from Galina and Matthias, that's the key point. We need to align the achievements we want with the rewards we are having. So that's the system. And in Syngenta, we have actually been struggling because we need the business case for investment as well. We want to support societal goals, but if there's no business case for sustainability at farm, it's the farmers who pay our bills at the end of the day. You know, this misalignment is a real hurdle. Now, how can we look and make this lively also in rural areas? We talked about the income. We believe there's a huge opportunity also in digital here, because in digital, with digital tools, you now reach every remote corner in every angle of Europe, and every farmer has a smartphone, and we are investing massively in digital services that will accelerate this learning. So with artificial intelligence, we will enable the farmer to take decisions based on the data from their soil rather than on averages. So we allow them to track their progress every single season. And we believe this will accelerate also the progress and the move to regenerative farming. And for the investment, you know, I said before, we are all in. We have committed 2 billion in the next 5 years to accelerate nature positive outcomes. And we are looking forward to working with all of you to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra, for your statement. This is also very interesting that you pointed out that it's all the value chain, that the incentive is not on its own, but it's also paid by the farmers. So it's a circle. And we can't just pull at one end or at one element, and the others are always affected by it. Thank you. So I would like to welcome the second speaker of our second block. It's Michael Scannell. He's Deputy Director General from the DG Agriculture and Rural Development of the European Commission. Michael, would you please unmute yourself and tell us your opinion on that?
Thank you. Pleased to take the opportunity. I think first and foremost, we need to be credible. So when we speak about climate change and the role of agricultural production in mitigation efforts, people have to basically be confident that we've got it right, that we have a roadmap, that we have the necessary policies, etc. And to be credible, we need to put in place the supportive framework. And I'd identify 3 particular contributions in that context. First and foremost, CAP reform. We really need to put in place a very ambitious common agricultural policy which ensures that food production can indeed become more sustainable in Europe, and that in turn that this can serve as a model for the rest of the world to follow. And the Commission has already outlined how essentially we want to ensure that farmers in the future are supported, for example, through eco schemes, where we plan a very substantial major investment, much more conditionality in relation to the funds they receive under the CAP, to basically reassure citizens that when we spend money on agriculture, this is conditional on it delivering on our green ambitions. The second major area where we really need to make progress to be credible is in relation to our legislative framework. And you'll find obviously our action plan in terms of climate change mitigation in food production in the Farm to Fork strategy, which sets out a detailed action plan on the measures that we propose to take over the next several years. And I'd highlight just one in particular, the proposed framework on a sustainable food system, which the Commission will present in 2023, which will capture the full totality of the various initiatives across all sectors, both production, retail, transport, processing, information to consumers, usages of inputs, etc., all geared at making our systems more sustainable. And then finally, and from my perspective, the most important one, how we ensure that this process is attractive to farmers, because farmers essentially provide the raw materials for the entire food production chain. And for sustainability to be attractive to them, it has to essentially ensure that they can make a good living. And here I'd highlight that the Commission's strategy on sustainability has 3 components. The focus tends to be overwhelmingly on the environmental dimension, but the Commission also has strongly emphasized the social and economic dimensions to sustainability. And here we're talking about, in particular, ensuring that farmers can make a good living through sustainable agri-food production. And we're confident that if we get those 3 building blocks, CAP reform, the regulatory framework, and strengthening the position of farmers' right, we can indeed ensure a sustainable food production system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. This is also, I think, a good point to the topic of this blog about social aspects. So to really have an eye on the farmer, on the farming people. Third person here to speak up is Bas Reever. He's the Global Head Sustainability. I'm sorry for that. From Rabobank. Bas, please tell us about your opinion.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I think a crucially important topic, and with a large number of well-respected speakers on it. So I'm really delighted to be part of it. Allow me to make 5 brief points. First of all, building on what was said by Mr. Scannell from the Commission, I think we need to be able to deliver concrete cooperation results in the supply chain. And if we want to link what is currently going on with the eco schemes with the market, it would be really important to make the connection between the eco schemes on a national level and what is already happening in the market when it comes to sustainability performance targets in the supply chain. So let us not have two worlds, the public world with the targets and the private world with the supply chain agreements. Let us see if we can make those into one concentrated effort. So a public-private dialogue on a national level. We have good examples on integrating biodiversity, for instance, in the dairy supply chain with the wide acceptance of indicator sets. Let us also use those on the eco schemes when working them out. Secondly, and it's already mentioned, we need longer term contracts. We need more personal commitment. We need to build trust in the chain. If we are able to have a longer term relationship between players, we are also able to make the connection on the ambition levels required to reach those 75% net positive farming practices by 2030. So spot markets will not help us to invest in solutions. We need longer term commitments. Thirdly, I think it's important, and that was also already mentioned by Mr. Scannell, that we need longer term predictability of policies. And we need to focus on performance, as was mentioned by Mrs. Laux, and we need to not focus on measures. The farmer needs to be trusted to deliver on the results, and we need to actually measure those in order to come to agreements between players in the chain. And if they deliver, they need to be paid for it. So it cannot be the case that we pay more at the supermarket and that the additional price we pay for biodiversity, for instance, is not transferred to the farmer. Fourthly, a more direct and personal link between producer and consumer will help to raise the willingness of clients, of citizens, to pay more for a decent product that takes into consideration this public ambition. And fifth and last, we need to scale up massively on the solution that carbon sequestration is. And therefore, and I'm totally aligned with what speaker said in the first block, carbon sequestration needs to be paid on a massive scale. And we are committed as an entity also to set up those schemes and to make them profitable for farmers to do the right thing in sequestration by setting up a totally separate bank for it, actually, the Rabo Carbon Bank. So I think on those topics, I would like to make a statement. A more personal, longer term relationship, also in the link between public and private, I think are the most important topics to get to that 75% or more as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Bas. Yeah, I think that's a saying often raised by the farmers that they would like to have a predictable politic that they can rely on, for example, subsidies or also from the bank and everything. So I think that's a very crucial point. I would like to ask the audience also for their questions in the chat, please. And we wanted to focus on social aspects. Up to now, we have more the focus on the general project or the vision by Systemic, which is fine. If the discussion goes that way, that's fine as well. But if you have some questions, especially on social aspects, please put them in the chat. Thank you. And so we have the fourth speaker of our second round, and it's Luc Bas. He's director of the Europe Regional Office of IUCN. Luc, would you please tell us what you think about the social aspects? Thanks.
Thank you. And it was really good to hear about the thriving farmers earlier, which seem to already go beyond the classical approaches. And I think that's one of the main reasons they are thriving. And I think the question is quite it's a big statement to say that the rural sector is in crisis. There is, of course, perspectives where we see this happen. We see land abandonment and the likes. And so, but we have to look, of course, at the different actors, the smaller, the bigger producers. I think the pressure is not evenly distributed. There's also the difference between those that are already going a stretch on sustainable production further than others. I think as we already saw, they are more successful and thriving, and I think the future will bring even more of that. And of course, the rural sector is not only agriculture. I would like to emphasize it as well. With that said, I'm happy to contribute here on the social aspect, where we would be expected to talk a bit more on nature and the nature crisis. That said, there is a crisis, we cannot underestimate it, and it's a crisis that's caused in many ways by unsustainable agriculture, but it also affects agriculture, and I just wanted to re-emphasize this. So these unsustainable practices will backfire on the farmers and the agriculture sector in itself, and it already does. We have estimates of $570 billion in global crops that are lost a year because of a pollinator loss. The other thing, of course, to emphasize is when we talk about nature positive agriculture, I think there is still a lot of interpretation there. There's many different ways to describe it. If we have clear outcomes of what it means, this nature positive agriculture, I think then we can also understand what the 75% is, and ICN is involved in the project and working with Systemic and the platform to better define and to stipulate this. But ultimately, we have to see how this also fits in the system. Local production will be important again. We have to look at trade flows. We have to look at, because these affect very much the social aspects as well. How much export is needed from Europe? How can we get the proximity back to the consumer and the producer? And then, of course, how do we move from quantity to quality? Because the quantity sometimes is not actually needed if you look at the enormous food waste that's being produced in Europe. So I think these are all elements to take into account when we will look at this nature positive agriculture and how that then can help the rural sector to thrive. One important thing is that when we will look at the criteria, it has this agriculture in Europe, this new nature positive agriculture will have to very clearly contribute to the Green Deal targets. And I would challenge a colleague from Syngenta that there is no outcome plan here. There is a lot of outcomes that are wanted in the farm to fork, and you can say pesticide reduction is a process, but I think the reduction in itself will have positive health benefits and have benefits for pollinators and reducing the threat, which then contributes, of course, to the biodiversity targets. One more point I wanted to make was on carbon sequestration. It's at the moment the best way to translate management or good management of land into some revenue from that sequestration, but there's always a risk that it doesn't necessarily increase, for example, soil biodiversity. So we need to make sure that when this carbon sequestration is happening, that it does contribute to nature. And then finally, I wanted to put attention also to a report that, two reports actually that ICN has produced. It's just for the context here, and I think it's interesting to see how these reports look at the social elements as well as the nature and the biodiversity crisis. One is on the approaches of sustainable agriculture. We have a lot of commonalities and good profitability for farmers. And the other one is the Common Ground report that was focusing on landscape biodiversity and resilient production systems. So really at the livelihoods for farmers. This is a global report, but it can count as well in the European context. And then at the very last, I would like to see that when we talk about these things, we talk about the level playing field. That's clear. I think it's important for everyone, for the environment organizations, for the farmers, for the producers, the sector. And one element that ICN can contribute is its global standard on nature-based solutions. And it would be interesting if the EU would reflect on looking at the minimum criteria that we've put forward of what a nature-based solution is, and then how that is part and can be supportive of a nature-positive agriculture, or sustainable agriculture, as we sometimes also prefer to say.
Thank you very much, Luc, on your case. And I think your background is very nature positive, especially the parrot on your head is very nature positive. I really, really like that background. Thank you. You get the cup for the best background in this session, definitely. As I said before, we don't receive questions focusing on the social aspects. And so I would like to hand over one question which we got, which is on a more broad spectrum, and it's from Janet Potechnik, the former European Commissioner for Environment. If 75% nature-friendly or regenerative farming is possible till 2030, there are two options. either the CAP 21 to 27 does not play an important role, or that CAP is consistent and fit to support that transition. What is the case? That's not an easy one. Who would like to answer on that from speakers here? Michael Scannell, maybe?
Yeah, speaking from the European Commission, because we're currently engaged in the CAP negotiations, clearly we need to provide a framework that gives our farmers, our food processors, indeed consumers, predictability on the future direction of our agri-food production systems. And we're trying in the current reform proposals to give them exactly that. And as part of that predictability, we plan to have a very clear supportive framework to allow our agri-food production systems to move decisively towards more sustainable production systems. Through the myriad of initiatives, the eco schemes are just one, the conditionality in respect of receipt of CAP-related funds, the various initiatives under the Farm to Fork, etc. And we're convinced that the Parliament and Council meet our level of ambition, we will have exactly that. We will have in place the predictability that allows society in general to basically shop, consume, produce, eat food in a sustainable manner. And in that absence, frankly, we will lose the predictability and credibility that I identified earlier, which is critical to basically ensuring that we have the framework to deliver on expectations. Thank you.
Thank you very much on that very clear statement, Michael. Thank you to all of you of the second round. Now we will switch to another topic and my colleague will get in the other speakers on the third topic. Thank you. Luc, Bas, Petra. I think, yeah, Michael, I already added. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now going to the third round. Bye-bye. See you later. The third question focuses on another aspect, and this is the consumer. Food is an emotive topic for many consumers, with climate and nature concerns as well as health factors. What should food buyers and consumers do to support nature-positive farming? So we will have an eye now on the consumer side of the whole thing. And now we have even 5 speakers here with me in the third round, and I would like to welcome first speaker Diane Holdorf. She's Managing Director, Food and Nature from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Diane, would you please unmute yourself and tell us your view on this topic?
Hello, Heike. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to be here. And I'm really thrilled to talk in this section where we bring some focus to the consumer and the opportunities that consumption plays in shifting the nature positive farming outcomes for the EU, because we all know that if we can get to the consumer behavior opportunities, we have a real unlock here indeed. And I was also really pleased when Rupert was sharing in his opening the focus on consumer action, because I think there's a real pride in source opportunity for us to focus on here. You know, even though a lot of people and all of us are consumers, we all make decisions every day. And a lot of even though us and many others say that they care about nature when they're choosing a product, including their food, the reality is, and we see this in all kind of consumer research, is that the majority of people make quick automatic choices. They base that on their cultural trends, their habits, their taste, often on price. And there's only a small share of the population that truly makes conscious choices when buying, even when making their food selections. So for that reason, we really need to think about, as food producers, how we focus on making our food appealing based on these other factors. Communicating it as nature positive can make it fun, for example. We can look to ways of thinking about innovation. We can focus on locale and source and taste that can be attributed to that. And of course, there's the very powerful connection directly through to farmers. I think these all create big opportunities for us when we start to create the case for nature and climate, of course, because what we do definitely see is that people are very aware of these challenges, and particularly younger generations are starting to translate this more strongly into food preferences specifically. We're seeing an increasing number of people choose to be flexitarian, vegetarian, even vegan. And I have to point out, this isn't just a developed world or Western world concept. We're actually starting to see these trends pick up in other countries where not necessarily those where it has been part of the cultural tradition, but even in China, where we're seeing people start to exhibit different types of choice, and we're seeing different government movement in that arena as well. And none of this is to say that we don't want balanced choice within a diet. We absolutely do, because of course we need to make sure that our nudges and encouragements are very much focused on nutrition and health and those types of outcomes. But as we think about how to encourage connection into nature positive farming through food choice selection, there's a lot of different options that we have. We can really think about this one planet, one health approach. And we held a really great session the other day with many of our member companies at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, talking about how one might link from a marketing perspective, food and climate communications. And I just want to share a couple of those learnings here and then pass on to the other panelists. But you know, when we're thinking about how to engage consumers, we always want to speak to human truths. How we craft our messages in ways that address the desires that we all have to make good choices for ourselves, good choices for our families, good choices for our communities, and yes, often increasingly good choices for the climate, for the planet. And this builds on current trends, as I was saying. So when we think about how we highlight the positives, we can find ways to be really consistent and in fact repetitive when we're bringing these messages to market, either through direct engagement or even indirect messaging. I think the one thing that's really important when we think about consumer choice in food, though, is democratization of those choices. We know that not everybody has the choice of not considering finance when they make their food purchases. We need to be able to think through the types of policy choices that will democratize food pricing for healthy nutrition, sustainable food outcomes that support these nature positive farming results that we're here talking about today. That allows us to empower consumers, and importantly in that consumer space to depoliticize it a bit as well and to really connect those dots. So by being more truthful about sourcing, by bringing more openness, connections to farmers, about how foods can be really beneficial for taste, health, joy, and planet, we start to see ways that we can really engage these consumers into these next steps that we know that we're here to talk about and to take action on today. And with that, Heike, I'll turn it back to you and to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Diane, on your point. And it reminds me to the question we had before about the diets and how the diets are linked to agriculture, which is quite obvious, but maybe not always well thought in the discussion. Thank you. So we go on to David Wilkinson. He's purchasing director at PepsiCo. David, the floor is yours. I can't hear you. Sorry, David, I can't hear you yet.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Heike. Firstly, thanks to Systemic and FFA for allowing me to participate in this really interesting debate this morning. I think in short, I really hope that consumers continue to demand more and more from companies like PepsiCo. I mean, consumers drive companies to change. Policymakers clearly play a role in creating the environment for things like what we're talking about today, nature positive farming. And obviously we at PepsiCo, as responsible buyers, we think about how we can do things better. But more than anything else, we follow consumer behavior and opinions. And when we consider the role of buyers, I think it's important to understand, the importance of agriculture. We know our business is based on agriculture. Most of our products start life in crop fields across Europe, and to ensure that we have the right relationships and supply chains, we have unique relationships with our farmers, and actually we work with them very, very closely to ensure that we're actually able to support their businesses, to support our businesses, and develop key changes and ambitions in this area. So, you know, we work with over 2,000 farmers as part of our sustainable farming program. And to the point made earlier, I think it was by Michael, is, you know, we look at how we source our crops through a holistic way, looking at social measures, economic measures, as well as the environmental measures to ensure that we're sourcing the right materials in the right way. And some of the things that we can do as buyers is share our knowledge and support our farmers to make some of these changes and give them the confidence to make some of these changes. 50% of my team are trained agronomists, and they're in fields every day, every week, working alongside the farmers. This gives farmers confidence to make some changes. But we have to understand we can't do it ourselves. We have to work closely with farmers, peer companies, NGOs, academic institutions to really facilitate some of these changes as quickly as we possibly can. And I want to just talk, the last time I have, talk a little bit more about the specifics of nature positive and regenerative agriculture. I think it's clear spreading regenerative practices across our agricultural footprint helps us be a better, faster and a stronger company, but it also supports a healthier planet, soils, watersheds and farming communities. And this is key to our objectives. And to the point that I think was made by Rupert right at the beginning, is we need to start taking some steps and acting. We may not know all of the key elements and all of the answers, but actually doing work, things like providing farmers access to data, in-season tools to help them grow crops better, adopt innovative circular ag tools, things like our waste-based fertilizer program, where we use our potato waste and use that for potato fertilizer in the following crop to over time improve our soils. I think the most important thing is we need to act now, and I've run out of time, so I'll stop at that.
That was a quick reaction. Thank you, David, on that. And thank you also for your talk. Thank you. We go over now to Christine Müller. She is Policy Officer, DG Climate Action at the European Commission. Christine, please. We can't hear you yet. She's still muted, but we will fix that as quick as possible. Ah, now she's gone. That was not the correction. Yes, now she's back. You can't speak up. Marie, could you do something about it? Otherwise, I would just take another speaker first. Yeah. Maybe we change the order and we fix it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was. It was not my fault actually. I could not unmute. You know, the button was not responding. But here we are. So thank you very much and good morning, everybody. So you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Food buyers and consumers have a particularly important role in the race. This is evident because they clearly massively outnumber the rest of the food system community, including farmers. The EU has around 450 million inhabitants, around 225 million households regularly purchasing food for their daily needs, of which only 11 million are farm households. Farmers need to feel plentiful support of the whole society in the race. The nature positive agriculture vision needs to be carried and nourished across the board. Food buyers and consumers need to take hope and confidence from the benefits and opportunities nature positive agriculture for a better environment, for a better climate, and for healthy nutrition offers them. They need to unite around the expectation of these benefits and the common vision and fully play out the strength of their diversity. Those consumers who are writing the media news should highlight and promote the nature positive agriculture vision. Those consumers who have voting rights should use them to bring politicians and parties into power who commit to make the transition a reality. Those consumers who are or will be committed politicians in power need to reach out to their counterparts who are agronomic, scientific, technical, commercial, nutrition and health experts, social caretakers to jointly work out clear targets and a limited number of transition pathways. These pathways must be regionally specific. reveal needed gives and takes, meaningful roles of various actors, and food system dialogues need to be organized to publicly discuss and decide, jointly commit on preferred feasible pathways and collaboration arrangements. Food buyers need to make clear which nutritional gaps, improvements in the richness and diversity of the food they buy they want to realize. And this should also resonate positively with the capacity and conditions of regional surrounding agriculture under given agronomic and climatic conditions. Food buyers can inspire themselves by nutritional guidelines, healthy and climate-smart traditional and modern weekly menus and recipes show cooked by famous cooks, chefs, also in school canteens. Food buyers for canteens, restaurants have more voluminous shopping lists and a broader outreach, and also need to lay a particular emphasis on sourcing nature-positive agriculture products. The EU Carbon Farming Initiative under the European Climate Pact would offer the opportunity also for consumer associations to help to set up a digital platform for nature-positive agriculture and food. The platform to provide geospatially explicit knowledge and information and connecting actors unified by vision, confidence, and joint action for progress. As we have seen, different food buyers and consumers, although sharing the desire for a healthy environment and healthy food, find themselves in very different individual situations with varying capacity to shoulder transition efforts and costs, to pay and finance reward payments to farmers for measurable, verified results in nature positivity, like increased rates of carbon sequestration in soils. With evolving knowledge and data, including digital identities and expression and exchanges of interest among all concerned actors, not at least via the previously mentioned digital transition and dialogue platform, it would be possible to duly consider also food buyers, consumers, individual needs and realistic capacities to participate, give and take in the process with the aim to above all jointly benefit from the transition towards nature positive agriculture and food. Thank you, and over again to you, Heike.
Thank you very much, Christine, for your statement. Thank you. And now we're going to the fourth speaker, which is David Cleary. He's Global Director for Agriculture of the Nature Conservancy. David, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Heike. The traditional COVID question, can you actually hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Great. So, I mean, I think I'd like to address two questions really. One, the obvious stuff, but I want to spend more time on the not so obvious stuff. So the obvious stuff consumers can do to support the transition towards a regenerative system is to make sure that their consumer spending sort of reflects the kind of demand signal that they want to make, that they're voting in ways that sort of advance that agenda, that they're being active citizens and advocating that agenda in whatever sort of public forums they're part of, you know, just being a good citizen on this issue. But that's almost blindingly crashing the obvious and shouldn't need stating too much. I'd like to dwell more on what's the not so obvious stuff. And I think there's 2 points here that I think it's really important to get across. And I think that, you know, ought to be driving a lot of the approaches we make towards provoking the kind of consumer behavior we'd like to see. The first is to remember that when you're talking about something as complicated as a food system, it's not a silver bullet type of question. That there is going to be no single strategy that's going to solve most of your problems. It's much more a silver buckshot type of solution. You're going to have literally dozens and dozens of strategies and actions that are all going to work together and interact with one another. And it's going to be really complicated, but that's the only way that you're going to be able to advance change at a system level, positive change at a system level. And what flows from that is that you as consumers, you need to be open to all options and strategies that can advance the goal of regenerative food systems. And I'll take one example, the organic sector. So we have a very ambitious target that Rupert laid out at the beginning of this talk of 25%. By 2030, 25% of European land under organic systems. That represents roughly a tripling of where we are right now. And if we achieve it, it's going to be a huge achievement. But it's still going to mean that in 2030, you're going to be reliant on non-organic systems for 75% of what you're consuming. So that means that you're going to be needing to, for the foreseeable future, certain levels of chemical inputs, a lot less than we've got right now. But you're going to need some. Hopefully much more targeted and everything, but you're not going to be able to take them off the table. There's all sorts of technological solutions around which some consumers are going to feel uncomfortable with. Well, that's something that perhaps so we're going to have to drive through in certain areas if we're going to be able to get to where we need to get to. And that kind of gets me to the second point, which is that you're a European consumer, but you walk into any European supermarket, any European food shop, there's stuff coming from all over the world. Your demand footprint is satisfied from all over the world. So my greatest fear and the greatest risk I think we have in thinking about the regenerative food system we'd like to get to is we actually hit those regenerative targets that Rupert laid out, but we hit them in the wrong way. We set out an incentive structure and financial rewards and so forth that reward biodiversity, that reward carbon sequestration, all that good stuff. But in doing so, you take certain amounts of land out of production. It has knock-on impacts on productivity and on output, and you end up satisfying those gaps from places like the Ukraine or the Soviet Union, or embedded deforestation projects from Latin America or wherever. And the result is you end up feeling really complacent about how well Europe's doing. And at the European level, that might actually be true. But when you zoom out and look at Europe's place in the global system, all that you've done is actually exported a lot of that demand to outside the European Union. And if you're like I am, a global, working for a global organization that's concerned with biodiversity and climate change everywhere, that's not a net win. So it's not just a question of hitting the targets, and consumers also need to understand it's how we hit those targets that's really important. So that in 3 minutes, I think that's the most that I can cover. It's a complicated debate.
Brave one. Thank you, David. Thank you for your statement. And now we have the fifth person in this round. It's Felix Prinz Löwenstein. He's the president of the German Federation of Organic Farmers, Food Processors and Retailers. We would like to hear your thoughts, Prinz Löwenstein.
Thank you very much, Heike. I'm a great supporter of the market economy, and I know how much well-informed consumers can achieve. Organic farms thrives on exactly that. And not only does it have a fast-growing market, but it is the only legally defined form of production that has long been scientifically proven to deliver the benefits one hopes for from nature-positive farming. This is why the farm to fork strategy has set a target of 25% organic farming, as David just pointed out. But can the market alone change the other 75% to provide the important public goods we are talking about? Recently, a German scientist made a beautiful statement. He said, how public goods are dealt with is not decided at the shop checkout, but in Parliament. In other words, we cannot take the position if the consumer pays for it, then the environment, climate, or animals are protected. And if not, then not. After all, it's not about satisfying a consumer whim. As Michael Scannell mentioned before, it is about the production requirements of our agriculture and thus about the basis of all our lives. So it cannot be a question of leaving the handling of general goods to the market, for the market knows no price for these goods. However, it is likely that the mechanisms of the market lead to the most efficient handling of common goods when they have a price. For example, the best way to use the creativity of farmers to sequester carbon by building humus is to pay a price for it. However, the question of how to measure and value the humus build-up has not yet been solved satisfactorily. So far, it has been easier to pay farmers under subsidy programs for practices that can be assumed with a high degree of probability to help build up humus. But perhaps we will soon be further ahead in this respect. An interesting example is the farm-to-fork strategy's goal of halving pesticide use. Here, I could imagine a high pesticide levy based on the environmental toxicity of the respective substance, and this would motivate farmers to replace chemicals with agricultural technology or healthy crop rotations. And industry would be motivated to develop substances that are less harmful to the environment. And so that the farmers would not lose the economic balance, the revenue from this levy could be paid back to the farms per hectare. I would expect such a method to have a much greater impact with a much smaller burden than would be the case with the use of regulatory law. But of course, David is right when he says there's no single silver bullet. There's a bundle of different things we have to use as instruments to solve all the pressing problems we are facing. But we cannot, and this is what I wanted to say, we cannot just say the consumer, the market will solve our problems, and if he doesn't want to do so, let's just continue the way we did before.
Thank you, Prince Löwenstein, for this very interesting point, especially in the round where we're talking about the consumer perspective on everything on that. So I would like to submit a last question from the audience, which is kind of a synthesized question. They came sometimes questions like that, and it's how can we make sure that farmers have more leverage in the marketplace? How can we connect them more closely with the consumers? Is there anybody of you who would like to answer on that? That's the first bullet going. Maybe David Cleary, would you like to answer?
I think farmers should be making more of an effort to interact directly with consumers through farmer associations and farmer organizations. I think, too often when we see farmer organizations on TV, it's to do with lobbying around whatever political issue or subsidy is being debated on the day. I think we do have the many workshops and conferences that I go to. We do see farmer representatives, but I think there could be many more of them. And consumers, I think it cuts both ways. There ought to be, I think there's a responsibility on the media to pay more attention to trying to bridge the gap between consumers and farmers. Consumers have busy lives, they have lots of things that they're doing. Really a lot of the responsibility for dealing with these narratives, bringing different people together is with social media, with traditional media. So driving these issues up the media agenda, I think, is a really important direct and indirect way of getting more contact between farmers and consumer groups.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting what you said, because also we have this skepticism towards the institutions. And so it's sometimes said that the normal farmers must be more included also in the public picture of agriculture. Prince Löwenstein, you get one sentence to answer because we're running out of time, but you would like to add something.
I just wanted to add that there are already so many beautiful examples how farmers and consumers can get together, and consumers can take over direct responsibility how farm can function in a good way, that if a consumer really wants to be engaged in that, he certainly will find a way to do it.
Thank you. So there are some ways to do it, also to link the farmers and the consumers. Thank you for you all in this third block, and we're going now to the end. And this means we would like to get another poll question to the audience. You know this question already, it's the same as in the beginning, but we would like to see if there maybe is some progress by the discussion, by the statements from the speakers. Do you believe a regenerative farming system in Europe is achievable by 2030? I fully believe it's achievable. I partially believe it's achievable. I don't believe it's achievable. Please press the button. Maybe we would like to have some Jeopardy music on that, but yeah, we didn't provide it yet. Next time, maybe. Dee 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 dee. Okay, thank you, Anne-Sophie. I think we could go to the results. Yeah, let's have a look. Oh, I think it's maybe quite the same. 73%. I think it was quite the same in the beginning. I had to note the numbers. Maybe Rupert had done that, and then we could have the comparison in between. So the most of you, again, the tendency to the middle is 73% to the partially believe in, and then 16% that they fully believe it's achievable, and 11% for don't believing it. Thank you on that. And coming back to the people. And here we go with all speakers again. That's nice to see you again. So Rupert, I have to see. No, he's not in here yet. I hope he comes back to us all. Yeah, here we go. Hi, Rupert. Would you like to give some closing remarks? What was your insight? What is your most thriving takeaway from this session?
My overwhelming takeaway is that seeing is believing, and we have to start walking the fields to believe the change that we will want to see. This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you all for your contributions. It's very notable, though, that the share of people who believe that a nature-positive farming system is possible barely changed from the beginning to the end of the discussion. And I don't think it would be physically possible to assemble a more knowledgeable, learned, and thoughtful group of people. So my only conclusion has to be, let's go to the field. Let's start doing this. Let's work with the nature-positive farmers that we already have, and the many who want to make changes, but for the many reasons Galina outlined so eloquently, will struggle and need support to start making a difference and to share their experiences with us and with each other and with the policymakers. And if we do all of that, and we do it now, then absolutely the change is possible. And thank you so much for all your contributions to the discussion today. And let me close in thanking Heike for an amazing job in moderation, and maybe we can give all of us a round of applause. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be a host on such a great round with great speakers and on a topic that really, takes me in as well, and is my topic as well. So it's a pleasure to host on stuff like that. And yeah, I hope the discussion will roll on with systemic, maybe in the aftermath of the event. You can reach out and everything. And also FFA is looking forward to contributions or your participation in further events. And so also from my side, thank you very much also for making my job quite easy with my little helpers. Thank you for your discipline. Thank you, the audience, for committing the questions, and have a nice day. And yeah, let's keep on working on these topics. Thank you very much. Ahoy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.